As you already know, we will now generate few shared components and also share the module to use those. First of all, let me clarify to you what will be those shared components. For example, if you would have your own navigation bar in your application and you need to show that navigation bar on multiple pages, as you usually do, then that component, that navigation bar, it's supposed to be a shared component. So we will create few of those, like our nav bar and also sidebar that we will have for our application. Next to that, we will also create a module, which will be a shared module to use those components. First of all, before those components, I will generate my own shared module. And to do that, I will once again use a tool, Angular CLI. One of the commands that we can use with this Angular CLI, which is this ng, is to generate. You can also use generate as a word here, or you can just use a simply G as a letter. After that, we can specify which feature from Angular do we wish to generate. For a component, we will use C. For a service, we will use S. And for a module, we will use M. And the last parameter here should be the name of our module. As I wish to create a shared module, I will pass a shared name here. Now, if you would go to your own code editor, in your source folder, app folder, you should have this shared folder. Shared folder should hold this shared.module.ts file, which is quite similar to our own app.module.ts file that we have. The difference here is that this app module is our main module of our application, while this shared module, is used to present one feature of our application, the shared part of our application. Also, just by generating this module, application itself won't know much about this module. So we need also to pass it somewhere to use it properly. As you already know, our app.module.ts file is a file that will hold all of our files from application. That means that in our imports array, we can simply pass our shared module, and it should be also imported here at the top from its own folder. By this now, our application will definitely know about this module and all of the components, services and other features that this module also have. Which means that by the end of it, our app module will pass all of that to our main TypeScript file, which will compile our code into the Angular application. Now, as I mentioned, next to our module, we should also generate our shared components. And again, we will use Angular CLI for that. So here, I will use command of ng, G for generate, C for component, and I will generate my component in shared /components/sidebar. This means that component will be generated in shared folder, then into components folder, and the component will be named sidebar. Hit enter here. Once the component is generated, Angular CLI will generate HTML, CSS, TypeScript file for us, and also the test file specific to that component, and it should also update the corresponding module. As you can see, it did updated this shared module that we have, which means that it did import this sidebar component into the module so we could use it. Next to this sidebar, I will also generate the component with the name topbar. Once both of our components are generated, I will go into shared folder, and in it I should have this folder of components, and inside we do have sidebar component and topbar component, and both of those will have HTML files, CSS files, TypeScript file and test file on its own. And also in our shared module TS file we should have imports in this declaration array for both of those components, which means that now these components, those belong to this particular module and those can be used in this module. Now, as I wish to use both of my components, my sidebar and my topbar components, as my shared components, let's open up their own TypeScript file. In this file we will have this selector. So we can use this selector as an HTML element to present these components somewhere. For example, if I would open up my main app.component.html file and remove the content from it, here I will use app, then topbar, and below I will use app-sidebar. So now we should be able to use these components, but there is an error here. The error itself, if we would hover over it, we can see that app-sidebar is not known as an Angular component to this part of this module, right? To this particular module. Sidebar and topbar, both components are belonging to this shared module that we have. But in our app module where we are planning to use it, in our main module, well, even though we imported the shared module, that won't just import all of the components from it. Why? Well, because we are just importing those components here and we are not exporting those. To export those after imports array, you can use exports and set up the array here. And what I wish to export is my sidebar component and also top bar component, which means if I would go now in my app.component.html file, I won't have those errors at all. So jumping really quickly into my browser, I will see this top bar works and sidebar works text. The text itself is coming from markup files from both of those components. That text was auto-generated by Angular CLI, so we could present something and test if those components are working, which those obviously do. I will add also one last thing before I close this video, and that last thing will be the container from Bootstrap. So here I will create the div, and I will use a class of container fluid, and here I will also use h1 as a text as a hello world, and that's it. So now next to our top bar and sidebar we should have this hello world text. And the next steps here would be, well, to create the content for our top bar component and sidebar component as well, and also to style those so we could see something on our screen for this COVID application.